Let's see. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
It's been a couple months, and the videos that we filmed were about your everyday job, the behavioral health unit, and also the hiring process. And so some of the best engagement we had during that span of videos was for the hiring process, which makes sense because, like we highlighted in the video, the hiring process can be daunting. The application process can be daunting. The testing process can be daunting. The background process can be intimidating and scary. And so for all those reasons, it's nice to have some help. And so I imagine people search the internet for tips and tricks to applying for cop work. And we provided a ragtag snippet of that. And surely it helped someone along the way. So because of that, now a couple months later, we've retooled. We've done some changes in the studio. And so I thought today that it'd be cool to have you back. And so printed off some questions to start the conversation, but we'll just see where the actual conversation takes us. So just to recap, to reintroduce Tim Watson. Been a police officer for a long time. I'll let you talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get rolling. So for those who haven't seen the early episodes, who are you? Who the heck are you?
Thank you. Well, I'm Tim Watson. I'm a police sergeant. Been a sergeant for, about 4 or 5 years, since the beginning of a pandemic. Before that, I was a corporal for about, 10 years. I'm just finishing up my 29th year of law enforcement, all at the same agency. So a little bit more half the time I spent as either a detective or a patrol officer, and since then I've been a first line supervisor. Currently, as you mentioned, I'm currently in charge of our behavioral health unit, which is a dedicated supervision of 5 crisis responders and a community outreach coordinator, all civilian staff, and it's a great job. One of those ancillary duties I have is also recruiting, which is a side piece of what I have, which involves community engagement and just talking to folks that are looking to get into this career of law enforcement. And
so that ancillary duty has you do it. And so it's got, I know what you're doing. So I'll get into each little element of it. So a part of it is recruiting, which isn't necessarily mean we're going to recruitment events or career fairs on a very regular basis, but we do hit a handful a year. A lot of what you do is like engaging with people who've applied to keep them kind of on the hook. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that first. So you get information somehow that people have applied or that they're interested in applying, or they reach out to you through a publication that the department will do and say, I'm interested in a job with your agency, help. And so you engage with them right off the bat. So I guess talk a little bit about that, and then I have a question too.
Sure. So when I took over the recruiting portion, I first made it known through the department that this was going to be a department-wide initiative, that it wasn't just going to be me doing the single point of contact for recruiting. This is a department-wide. We are all recruiters to go do recruiting. So you're right. I do go to some job fairs. I have others that go to job fairs to meet people that are out in the job market and see what we can do to help. The the other facets of that are, as being that point of contact, when I learn somebody is interested, either a person who has volunteered to be on the recruiting team, or just someone come up and say, hey, I got this person and they're interested in a career in law enforcement. They don't know where to start, or they have some questions in between about, where do I go on the internet to sign up for things, and what are next steps, and what do those steps look like? How long does it take? Just a flood of frequently asked questions. So I created a document also that I could email out to people. They could have in their hand, in their palm, and they could read, here are the next steps and what to expect. So that's what that looks like when I first get the contact. I make note of it. I put it into a lead management system that I created so that we don't have people that fall through the track, get their contact information, try to get people set up on a ride along as soon as I can in the process, because I believe the best way to see law enforcement is from the inside of the car looking out.
And so I use the term keep them on the hook because unlike maybe in years past, we are dealing with a small pool of highly qualified candidates. And they are highly sought after because so many agencies are hiring and are short-staffed. The high quality candidates are a precious commodity. And so when we get especially when it's somebody we know, or when it's somebody, one of our coworkers knows, they say, hey, this name's going to hit the application list or the civil service list. They're good, and here's why. We need to get them. Just so you know, they've applied at 3 other agencies, and they're the competitor agencies that we're always racing to get the best candidates. Right. And so one of the things we've found helpful is getting those recruits into our building and making them rightfully feel like we want them to work for us, getting them introduced to different people, just making them feel at home. And it's a tactic, but it's genuine. Like if I can think of a couple candidates who we really liked our first touch on them, and it's like we need to get them through the background as quick as possible, while doing a complete background. But also we need to make sure they know we're serious about them working here, and we want them to want to work here. And so you play a role in that.
You bring up a good point that at the beginning of my time learning this recruiting spot, I went around and interviewed folks that we'd recently hired and said, what made you pick and stick with us? And kind of across the board, they said that they really appreciated the individualized, personalized attention that they got from the staff across the board. Like they felt like when they walked into the building, everyone they walked by was welcoming, would at least look and smile or give some pleasantries, which seems like a no-brainer and sounds like our building. And the staff they had contact with were available to answer questions that had come up or provide information. And in contrast to the competitors, they noted it was a stark contrast of they felt like I was just a number. Like I don't even think the person knew my name. Felt like they were kind of an obligation put upon the person that they're with. And there was no sense of interpersonal connection happening. So that I said, well, let's build on that. So that's exactly, we're definitely more intentional about that. It's organic happens in our building, that's the way people are, but to be intentional about a group of people that funnel through from our HR person who I communicate with regularly to our background investigators, that we have warm handoffs from each person to know, is there an underlying question this person has had or a pervasive question that the person has had? And we want to make sure that we get that answered, and also know that we do care about them as a human being, that we want them to be our coworker. That's the way we go at it. And at other places, they felt like they were just trying to find a way to get me either, I guess, maybe hired, but like, how am I going to disqualify you? I'm not going to invest in you because I'm not going to emotionally invest in you or interpersonally invest in you until you get through all the hoops. And we just don't do that. We want people to feel welcome, and maybe they're not going to get hired here, but at least they're going to think down the road, they're going to get hired at another agency. They may think, I think I had a good chance at Longview. Maybe I'll go back over there, down the road, they could lateral. And we just want good people in law enforcement. They could be across the river from us at the next agency. We want to be good coworkers collectively in our region.
And maybe there are certainly there are other career fields where when you bring someone on, you may be bringing them on for a 30-year commitment. Like you may work with them forever. Like certainly many of the people we're hiring today, you and I will be long gone when they are sergeants and chiefs, just because they may be here 30 years and you and I don't have 30 years left. And so you really want it to be a good fit. And sometimes when you get them in the building and they get around people, you go, this might not be a good fit for them. And they recognize it and we recognize it. And they have lots of options because cultures are different in agencies everywhere. And so that adds a layer of seriousness to the vetting process, because no one wants to work with a turd for 30 years or sent, that's a death sentence for the agency to say, here's this employee that's going to be malfunctioning for the next 30 years and you're stuck with them. And so when we are engaging with an applicant, you mentioned this before, we are also encouraging them to visit other places, right? For that, and so that's where I was headed with that. For that reason, you will encourage them, hey, go across the river. If you're interested in mud in the muck and wearing green, the sheriff's office is hiring too sometimes. And
get on the highway and
head
watch
south.
the state patrol.
Yeah, right. And so we do encourage people to do that. And I think it's a little bit of professional courtesy, but it's also because we try to take it, even though we're desperately short-staffed a lot of times, try to take it really serious, that it's one thing to fill a pair of boots and put them on the road, and it's another to bring someone on that will positively contribute to your culture for the next 30 years. And so so that's all about kind of getting them on the hook and getting them in the building. But then another thing you're a part of, unless you had more to add to that.
I don't think so. Like we talked about, I think it's important that the 30-year hitch together is that we have someone who has good connection. We're weeding for character. That's probably our first. We want to make sure the person of good character, morals and ethics values that align with our department. And then they're competent. They have the competency to do the job. But then that connection between the coworkers, we are intentional about that too.
Mm-hmm. So
that's the 3 C's from Bill Hybels that I've probably messed up a little bit, but I like Bill Hybels.
Just to back up a step, we just briefly discussed it, but this is different, this staffing crisis that we're in, probably than any other time as long as we've been police officers, because the number of candidates willing and interested in being police officers has decreased. And so we probably can't flush out exactly what's going on in the world, but we can certainly speculate on the easy ones, the low-hanging fruit of why the candidate of people willing to be police officers is so small compared to what it used to be, because there's not a great deal more jobs. It hasn't increased so much that's the reason. And so I guess what would you say is, from that angle, one of the biggest hurdles police agencies are facing, finding interested candidates, finding people who want to be police officers today?
So I mentioned before I took over this ancillary duty. It was 2020, so right when we were in the middle of the pandemic. And not only was there a global pandemic, there's a national shift towards anti-policing. And then we also had some, not in our jurisdiction, but we were smack dab between 2 places in our region that had social unrest. That was also a sentiment of anti-government / policing. So it became a challenge for a person out there watching the TV and seeing this profession and the people in it getting just bashed, just nonstop. And then you get the social media, the clips of the officer, just not doing it right, or it's edited so it just looks horrible, this interaction. And you get good, honest, hardworking folks out there going, do I want to be under that microscope to do that? And the microscope hasn't really changed. Our profession has always been geared towards doing the right thing for all the right reasons. Mm. And though there are humans that we keep hiring, and humans tend to stutter and fall, but it's that the microscope is now, the standards haven't changed, just the exposure has changed. So that has affected a wider group of people that, again, are looking at this profession going, is that what I want to get into? So I think it's kind of hurdle 1 when I'm at job fairs, and if it's a job fair that is multiple career fields, like you got dozens, if not 100 different career fields there, not just a law enforcement one, but people walking by and they've never considered a law enforcement career, engage them in conversation of why, what is it you're looking for, and hearing what they have to say and tailoring it to how that could tie into a career in law enforcement. More and more people are coming to the realization that it's really just not as bad as what the media is portraying it to be. They realize that some creative editing has happened on some incidents, and some people have looked at that and just they've got even a greater call for service and duty to their country. It pales to comparison of the people that chose to serve after 9/11, but people are seeing wrongs and injustices, and it touches their heart, and then they want to serve. Mm-hmm. They want to be the good cop because they know themselves that I will be the good cop that needs to be out there to help the innocent.
It's a different, I think it's in the same vein, but there's a different perspective of that too, or a different angle. And that is, certainly you come into contact with people who they're not interested in a career in law enforcement. Maybe they used to be, but they're not anymore, because they don't want to be associated with the police because police are bad. Because my friends will be disappointed in me if I join the police force, and join the dark side.
Yeah.
And so you certainly must encounter that sentiment.
It's that extreme is kind of rare, but the sentiment is there. I direct people to go out and read what's being said about our agency in the media, in the news, on the social media, and see the work where they're doing. If you see posts of some work that we've done, what are people commenting? And I'll take the good for the bad. Just do some research, look into it, and see what you can find, because I see what's posted out there, and 99% of it, not statistically, but about 99% of it is positive stuff. Mm-hmm. And if you were just to watch the news, you may get, wait a second, 99% of it's all bad stuff. We are putting out information as a department on social media, and we're not editing it to make sure it looks good. It's raw. You'll see some raw videos that happen, maybe some editing to capture full context with words that describe what happened. And then people can take that and comment. And the comments are positive. Walk around our town and talk to people. I'm sure someone got a speeding ticket, and they didn't like that interaction with the police. But again, 99% of the time they would be like, "But I respect the officer that did it. He or she wasn't a jerk about it." We try to have striven to be a professional agency, and I think that carries out through our community. And kudos to our community for supporting us. It makes that job a lot easier, and that the community engagement with the police engagement is so critical at this juncture in our history. The police don't have, maybe if you go back 30, 40, 50 years ago, where it was the police were kind of this organization above, and don't worry, I'll make sure you are safe, whatever my definition of safe is going to be right now, and take control of the reins and decide what's going to happen. There's way more community input nowadays compared to when I started 30 years ago of how policing happens in people's neighborhoods. The officers may think, I think the worst thing that's happening here is anything that's not bolted down gets stolen. Meanwhile, you talk to the people in a neighborhood and they're like, we just want the speeding cars to stop.
Yeah.
So then we redirect a priority. And that, again, bringing that back around to the recruiting is go out, ask people in the community, read what's happening in the community, and you'll get a good flavor about what that agency is about. There you'll see articles about internal strife at certain agencies, and they can't keep a chief, or commanders are getting moved around or indicted. That's not happening at our police department.
Actually, I never thought of that before. And this is not what I was going to comment on that, but since it was the last thing you said, it is a big clue to look an agency up in the news and see that they've had 5 chiefs in 5 years. That either means they're bad at picking chiefs, or they don't have community support, or they don't have internal police officer cohesion. Something's wrong. To go through a bunch of chiefs in a really short period of time.
One thing I came across with our agency recently that I think points to healthiness is 15% of our officers are descendants of police officers. The majority of that, 15% of our patrol staff, patrol officers, and the majority of them are direct descendants of another employee, either current or retired. So somebody in their life, their mother or father, became a cop, served a career long enough for them to now be old enough, 21 or older, become a cop at the same spot. We've got kids. Your kids talked about going into a career in law enforcement. My child just graduated with a criminal justice degree. I think it leads to... I used to be asked this question a lot of when I would do recruiting events, and I'd have a presentation. They'd almost at the end of the presentation, every time someone would ask, would you have your own child work as a police officer? Now, my daughter, I wouldn't, because she doesn't. That's not her. It's not her skill set. But yes, if that was her skill set, definitely. She has a criminal justice degree, so she wants to be helpful in that way and help be part of the solution. The next thing that we have is our cadet program. This is kind of a side tangent, but this is, I think, also a great thing. 10-12% of our patrol staff are former cadets, which means they graduated from the cadet program from being like a 16 to 20-year-old, saw what the interworkings were of our police department, said, I want to be there, and are here, to include our chief of police. So 25% of our staff have like direct tie relative, or were in working, be it a volunteer as a cadet, for some period of time before becoming a police officer.
Yeah. That specifically to our agency, that speaks volumes. Yep.
I would say show me another agency. I literally would be curious to see if there are other agencies that are having that same experience. We have children from agencies from within our county that have come to our department.
Yeah.
That, to me, that speaks volumes. Your mother or father works at a different agency, and now you're here at ours.
So you mentioned my kid who's interested in cop work. She has mentioned working somewhere else. And nothing, and it's not a knock at our agency because she was a cadet at our agency, but I think it has as much to do with just wanting to work somewhere where the MCNEW name's not already on a name tag. I don't want to use the term like not in my shadow, but like I have a shadow. Yeah. I hold some rank there, and it would. And actually, there's some precedent for this because we see a similar relationship. And so it would be tough to make your own name, especially as a lady coming in to cop work, to make your own name and get out from underneath mine. And so I think she'll do it. But I think it might be somewhere else. But not because she wouldn't want to work where we are. So
first of all, is just getting into the profession. Like the question of like, would you have your kid get in that profession? Yeah, without hesitation. 2, whatever agency they go to, it's gravy.
Yeah. I used to say no hesitation, but more recently, say the last 2 years, I have had more hesitation. And I don't think it's just because I'm getting older and more nervous about things, but do you want to take a stab at what it might be? I have more hesitation, more pause, where I go, kid, fire service wouldn't be so bad. Can you guess what what creates that? And I'll give you about 2 seconds, then I'll just answer my own question.
What creates an anxiety?
What created that anxiety in me?
I mean, for me, it would be a father knowing that my child was going into harm's way.
Yeah. But that has always been the case. But something has changed recently.
And that's why I was trying to figure out what you're alluding to. What happened really recently would be liability.
We just went through a spat of an attorney general in Washington State maliciously charging police officers with unsubstantiated criminal charges, all of which were acquitted, right?
Correct.
And so, but what a horrible ordeal. This guy's now governor, and it just seemed like such an obvious political move. And so he made victims out of police officers who their actions had been reviewed internally, externally, by prosecutors, by the courts, and no wrongdoing found. And he circumvents all that and charged them. And now he's governor. Yeah. And so that has created my most recent hesitation to go, that's not a state I won't say it's a state I work in, but it gives me a little bit more hesitation when my kid says, "Hey, I want to do what you're doing." I go, "Boy, it's just so you know, this is happening now." And so that gives me more pause than I ever had before.
And you couple that with discussions about removing qualified immunity. And just to be clear, you have to qualify for the immunity. They actually put it in the name of the qualified, and it seems to be omitted when you start reading some articles or some people that are for removing that cops shouldn't have, nobody should have immunity if they're out there murdering people in the streets. Absolutely, 100% correct. Correct, and you don't. No. You have qualified immunity because you do what has been a standard practice, often for centuries, what the courts have already affirmed, and now there's something new that comes along. Technology has changed. Court opinions are ever evolving, and I like to tell people that an analogy is we're like an archer who has drawn the arrow back and perfectly aimed. The last arrow went right on the bullseye. Everything's perfect, setting up, and you shoot the arrow. And then someone goes and moves the target before it gets there. And then it's like, "Hey, why'd you miss the target?" Like, well, everything I did at this moment was correct by policy, procedure, law. Yes. But the courts are changing the law, or the legislature is now changing the law and its application. Like, oh gosh. Well, I would have never have wanted to run afoul of policy or law procedures. Okay, well, you're going to qualify for immunity then. In a nutshell, compared to it's pretty established that you shouldn't murder people.
Yeah,
you shouldn't break someone's nose just because you didn't like what they said.
I mean, I had never really heard it the way you first described it, which is don't confuse immunity, absolute immunity, with qualified immunity. You must qualify for it.
Yeah,
it's not a blank check to go do whatever you want. It's that in review of the circumstances, you acted appropriately based in what you knew at the time to be law, policy, and ethics. So,
yeah.
But unfortunately, that
the landscape is changing now.
Is changing, yeah.
And the anxiety comes from the not knowing.
Yeah.
Where are they going to move this target to next that we've been shooting at for a while?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I suspect that is a hurdle for prospective police officers.
Yeah. Some people are really they're fixed and they want to know step by step, bullet points. This is what you do. And they're kind of a linear, fixed mindset. And we need people that are more of a creative mindset that can look. We are creative people and they're generally able to look into the future in these things. And right now on this specific issue, we're looking into the future with a bit of uncertainty, but we have an idea. We've seen the prior plays in the playbook, and we can anticipate what might happen to best equip people. All that to say, police officers are still going to be a necessity in our society, to be out here, to be good people, to do the right things. And the applicants, the ones that are serious about us, have looked into policing. They know, and they get that, regardless of that anticipation of liability, they realize that we are all dedicated to training the person to make sure that they are equipped to make those right calls.
There's a lot of ways to answer this question, so just answer it however you want. in 30 years of police work, how has police work changed, and how has that impacted who and how we hire?
Gosh, back in the late 1900s, when I started policing, we had a police car with no computer in it. Mm-hmm. We had a notepad. Either you wrote it down or you just remembered it, whatever it was that was being thrown over the radio at you. So technology clearly has changed just leaps and bounds. We didn't have access to the internet or actually even a GPS to get places. You just had to map and you had to know. Now, moving forward to today, I got so much electronics in my car, the whole World Wide Web at my fingertips and a tablet with a computer-aided system to help me dispatching. I don't need to remember what the address was or the case number was. Like, all that's just given to you, and it's also being told you on the radio. Like, sometimes I sit back and I marvel at 1900s me thinking like, man, at some point there might be this thing called a computer that might have to have that in the car. And now I'm printing off pictures in a car to go, who does this person look like? Print it up. I can walk and go, oh yeah, it's this guy. No one has to drive downtown, go through a 3x5 card book, box catalog and try to find out, oh, here's his mugshot for.
The evolution of that was funny too, because when we first got computers, whatever. At one point I had a laptop like this one here, but a big chunky compact laptop, just like viced into a stand. And they just open and close the lid. And now, of course, they're like integrated machines, but.
Yeah, it was measured by kilobytes for the RAM, like 256 maybe.
Yeah. And so technology has changed, but other things have changed too.
Yeah.
And keep going.
Next thing that happened is in my career became the CSI effect, which was, but now CSI's, well, they've had 30 different versions of it. But back then, way back when, we had fingerprint powder and DNA was coming on about then. It was something that was super expensive and rare to have. But you watch CSI and they were taking a cell phone photo of a bloody fingerprint and messaging it to a lab, and they came back with, here's the DNA profile, and the guy just used his credit card at Joe's bar. And I'm like, how did that even happen? It's not even realistic. But that came the standard by which people in the community who end up being jurors were seeing. So the necessity to be tech savvy now with our investigations has increased. Before, we may have not have considered going and getting video evidence at, say a burglary happened or a theft. Now we canvass to see how much video evidence we're going to be getting. Everybody's got some kind of a camera out their front door, back door, a drone that they're flying. Mm-hmm. Like, there's just so much media-rich things out there for us to gain.
We ran into each other on that shooting a couple weeks ago, where like once everything was stabilized and the investigation started, you just kind of do a 360 and go, I need a team of 4 guys to start getting all these cameras from all the Ring cameras on every house in this neighborhood. And there's just so much video to be had.
And while we were out there, I can't remember if you were there or not. I looked up, I go, is that our drone or somebody else's? Yeah. It was somebody else's drone that was flying, about 20, 30 feet above our heads.
The freelance news. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what has changed? The public's ability to view our job has been opened greatly, for the bad that I mentioned before, but also the good, that they get to see what it is in real time. Sometimes if they've, watching their Ring camera or their drone footage of what it is we're out there doing.
So hoping I was prepared for that answer. So do you think that the ability for bad deeds to be made public has changed who's interested in being a police officer? Do you think that it used to be more common? And I don't know the answer to this. Do you think that it used to be more common for someone with bad motives to get hired as a police officer who just wanted to be a bully? But now, knowing that they are constantly under the scrutiny of their own camera, their buddy's camera, and every cell phone camera in the community, that has actually helped steer those people into whatever, a different career, away from police work. If that ever even existed. But I think it did.
It has to have, right? There has to have been people out there who felt powerless and wanted to have power over people. And because we weeded them out through our background process, the best, we being the police in whole, as best you could. But some people get through, and also people have life changes that happen. But you're right. What a better way of accountability. And on the front end too, of if you were somebody who you just like did an honest self-assessment and went, I'd be a good cop. Yeah, I get hot-headed now and then. I'm sure that person has to start thinking about that and be like, I can't afford to be hot-headed. I can't risk it. And we don't want somebody to do that, to be clear, but I would hope that the honest person with a self-assessment, which everybody who's applying should try to have the best self-assessment, plus ask others, like, what are my flaws? Well, you get pretty hot-headed when someone doesn't use their turn signal. You might want to consider something different.
I was reviewing something the other day, and so I was watching some body cam, and I had a thought, and then I went to a sergeant, and I said, hey, I want you to watch this with the sound off. And then I want you to watch it with the sound on, just as a test to see how it changes your perception. Because if you watch it as I did, I had the sound off and I watched through it. I was looking for something in the video. I was writing a press release actually. And so I was looking for something in particular. And then I started it over and the sound was on this time for whatever reason, but not the first time. The actions were completely appropriate. The officer was excited. It was the end of her pursuit. And he was yelling. And when you hear him, you go, oh, is that officer in control of himself? I know he is because I can see his actions. But the lesson, and we talked about this back in 2020 when we had our own civil unrest, is sometimes you can be doing everything right, but you sound out of control. And that confuses the brain of witnesses. And so be mindful of your tone and what you're saying, because you can be doing everything right, but sound out of control. And they don't match. But in this case, the officer clearly was doing everything right, and he wasn't doing anything inappropriate, but he was really excited, and it sounded out of control. And so I said, just use it for what you want. I found it because I was looking for a press release, like I said, or a soundbite or something like that for a press release, or a video clip anyway. And I said, just use it as an opportunity to just sit down and go, what do you think of this? Because we're our own worst critics, right?
Right.
We work in a profession of professionals. And so I know that if I were to watch myself in a video, because I have lots of them, and go, I could have said that different, or I wish I had done that different, right? We're our own worst critics. And so I think that the body-worn camera, which is not what this conversation started as, is actually a super helpful tool, because it, just being someone who receives a lot of complaints from citizens about officer conduct, it's just so quick to close them out.
Yeah, the rollout of the body cams happened within the last several years now too. Talking about changes to our work environment, and it did change how I did things. It caused a concerted effort to think about building the record. And now, we've turned now this corner about the technology, but I now have a shtick that I start with of almost every conversation, even if I've seen this person a million times this week. Mm-hmm. Hi, Sergeant Watson. I'm here for this reason, and I'm establishing my authority as the police officer and what my legal authority is, or at least what I'm understanding it to be as I'm talking to this person. Yeah. I'm here addressing that you are trespassing, or I saw you jaywalking, and you have to think ahead about building that record, which protects me, protects the citizen, and it makes it easier for the lawyers to get to court, and then also being able to modulate your tone as well. That's important. That reminds me, speaking of the shooting that we're at, 3 weeks ago, when you got there shortly after I did. We started approaching, and this guy is not following our directions. The guy who did the shooting, he's standing in the middle of the road, about 3, 4, 5 houses up from us at this point. So we're walking up behind a shield, walk towards, and he's just yelling, engaged at somebody towards this house that he had just shot at. We could see that his hands were clear. He didn't have at least that gun in his hand anymore. You don't know if he had any more guns or not, but he's not focusing on us. And as we're getting closer, I'm listening to this guy screaming, and I can't remember exactly the words that were said, but I could discern that he is experiencing trauma and is voicing what is happening to him. And his anger is for what had happened, and it's directed towards not us, which is good. So we get closer, and I am tasked with handcuffing. So at this point, he's compliant to the point like he laid down on the pavement, and he wasn't quite putting his hands where they needed to go. So I had to kind of give him more direction. Hey, put your hand back over here for me. And he's yelling that nobody's listening to me. And I'm thinking, man, I just got up here. I just put handcuffs on a guy who just shot somebody. And his concern right now is that I am not listening to him. I'm listening. Like, how do I convey I'm listening to this guy? But I also need you to put your hands behind your back for me, man. So I just calmly, matter of factly, I'm like, hey, put your hand right here. And he does. And we get him handcuffed. And as soon as we get the handcuffs on, he's just like, why won't you guys listen to me? And he's just screaming at us. Meanwhile, the rest of you are still doing cop stuff, trying to make sure the scene is secure, addressing all the other people that are around in this neighborhood.
Saving a life.
Saving the life of the victim who was shot, that's laying on the front porch there. So I grab the guy and get him up to his feet, and he still is yelling, hollering, screaming at people, not necessarily at me, but he's just into the wind at times, and he's amped up. So I walk him to a safe location, and he turns to me, and he just as loud as he can, nobody's listening to me, and he voices he says to himself, I need to calm down, and I calm to him, man, I'm a pretty calm guy. Do you think I'm pretty calm right now? He's like, yeah, you're pretty calm right now. Why don't we sit and talk then? So we sat down and talked. And so I played this video as this has happened. I come back to the office and download the video, and I'm showing it to some of my crisis responders. It's comical at times to self-assess and go, I was just at a scene where there was a shooting where we had to intervene with a guy who was hostile, not combative towards us, but had just shot somebody.
Gun was at his feet, 10 feet away.
Right. It was still in play. And all the while, you would think I was out for a Sunday drive and had a cup of coffee in my hand and was just talking about the weather.
Yeah. That I mentioned, that reminded me of when we first got dash cams. So the agency I was with before was somehow we were just a little bit ahead. Somehow we got dash cams in all the cop cars. And they were digital. They used SD cards, so they were fairly new. This was 2008-ish. And when we first got them, it was a tool. We found it really helpful. Even back then, you could see it, make it easy to figure out exactly what happened when someone complained, for example. If someone were to complain about me as an officer back then, it was pretty easy to go, play the tape. And I got nothing to hide. And the video's yours, that you own them. And so with 100% accuracy back then, complaints were easy. Mm-hmm. As often as they came in, it was easy to go, no, here's what the officer did. It's on video. And back then it was less common to have video. And so people were surprised when they were complaining about the cops, and it didn't, what actually happened didn't match their memory of the complaint.
How did the video, I talked about how kind of video changed me. How did the video change you then?
Yeah. So it was a brand new tool, and I'd been about a 5-6 year cop. And what it made me realize first of all, it made me realize, the words matter. Mm-hmm. And so become really careful so that the words you're using are clear and that they're the words you mean. Meaning, if you ever were to, take a jab, make a sarcastic remark or something like that, you can't help but it be in the back of your mind, okay, now I'm on video. And if I wouldn't say I'd ever done anything unethical but unprofessional, borderline. If you consider like a sarcastic remark, like someone's malfunctioning and mouthing off to engage back and go like, but you're an idiot, or something like that. You would go, you can't help but consider whether it was worth that being on video. And so, but more importantly than that, like to help my job, what it did was I figured out somewhere along the course early on that it actually helped me articulate facts that I was seeing if I said them out loud. For example, if there was a time, let's say this hypothetical, I would see someone rummaging around in a car. Prior to dash cams, I might say, put your hands up, step out of the car, stop, whatever. When I knew it was being recorded, it gave me this realization that I could be more specific and that it would be captured on video. Something you could arguably say, well, you could have been doing that all along. True. This just as a young cop, this is what made me realize, hey, this is a valuable tool for documentation. So rather than say, put your hands up, I would say, I see you reaching for that thing, put your hands up and step out of the vehicle. Or sometimes in a struggle, you'll say, stop resisting, or whatever. But on video, it looks like nothing because muscular resistance looks like nothing sometimes. And so rather than stop resisting, you could be more specific. I feel you tensing up. I feel in your muscles that you're tensing up. Stop fighting me. Relax your muscles. Let me put you in handcuffs. Whatever. So much more specific than stop resisting. And part of it was the realization like, hey, if I do this in the video, it's correctly and properly documented. And that's like hugely valuable as people became more and more reliant on video evidence. And you could argue that people have become less reliant on eyewitness testimony. That a jury would rather watch a video and make their own determinations than hear a witness tell you a story about what they saw happen.
Yeah.
So that's just the video world we live in. And so
that's how things have changed in law enforcement for sure. I think that's probably, it's got to be one of the biggest things is that technology into the courtroom, from the street into the courtroom, that pipeline.
Mm-hmm. So one last thing, and then we'll put a pin in this episode, and that is, I thought about this while you were telling your story about the whether videos and like the fishbowl effect has kept bad actors away, and I think that it has. But I also think that the technological world we live in now and what we now know about police work and what makes good cops has also changed the perfect candidate. In 1960, the perfect candidate might have been 6'6" and just swung a heavy club. And now what we value is someone who's technologically savvy, who communicates well, who is morally and ethically sound. And maybe they did that back then too, but the person, when you close your eyes and picture the perfect cop, is no longer just a tire banger. He's not just a brute. It's men and women of all shapes and sizes who bring different skills of, like I said, communication and technological savvy. Still, yes, the type A tactical guys and gals for sure, but the world we live in, we've just learned to use all those other tools to become a big happy family. And so I think, I'm curious if you want to weigh in just to finish it out, how that evolution from the brute of the 1960s and 70s has changed to something different.
Yeah, I agree. I remember back in college, before I was hired, so I'm a teenager, and my college instructors were retired Seattle officers, so they were employed in the 60s and 70s. And one of them, he told a story about how he was 5'11.5", and he hung in the doorway so he could make the 6 foot mark, because that's what they were hiring for, was you have to be above this 6 foot mark and swing a mean club. And the stories he told of working in Skid Row would not fly today. That was policing back then. So yeah, if we're going back, what our ideal candidate is, it is now all walks, all shapes and sizes. There's cops that are under 5 foot. There's cops that are almost 7 feet tall. And the being physically fit is important still, so it can't be necessarily of any size, but must be fit and have a sound mind. Because you're going to in this job, you use your mind a lot more than you are going to be swinging a club. Ideal, if you've used your mind, you ideally, not always an ideal world, you don't have to use the club. But we don't know. The bad guy always gets a vote.
It's a different conversation, perhaps, but there are plenty of police officers who carry a baton and have never used it. We carry enough tools or have access to enough tools of the trade that everybody has a preference on the way they fight, and the tools that they use. Either there's people who are very taser heavy. They like to use the taser. There's people who prefer to use pepper spray. There's people who use the baton, all in lawful ways. And there's a lot of overlap on when you can use all those tools. And so lots of options out there. So as opposed to, pepper spray's been around a long time, but the modern taser, although, and again, a separate podcast maybe, but not always effective. It does have a great deal of effect when it works. And so, on that, I think what we'll do is we'll stop there, we'll regroup, and we'll start this. There is a ton to flesh out on the hiring process, the recruiting process, the background process, what makes good police candidates. And so for the sake of brevity in an hour-long sweet spot, we'll push pause there, and we'll call that an episode. So thanks for watching.